All right, ready to dive into The Millionaire Next Door? You were curious about this one, and I have to say it's full of surprises about how everyday people build wealth.
It really is. When you think millionaire, you picture, what, mansions, sports cars, right?
Yeah.
But this book blows that stereotype out of the water.
Yeah, it totally flips the script.
It's not the flashy lifestyle you often imagine.
So who has the typical millionaire, according to this book?
Think more like your neighbor who runs a solid small business, drives a sensible car, lives a comfortable life, but isn't out there trying to impress anyone. It's about building wealth, not just showing it off. The book really emphasizes this idea of net worth as the true measure.
Net worth, not I need the newest everything.
Exactly. It's not about, again, that to use an analogy from the book,
Yeah.
but what you actually owes WN. Like they compare it to owning cattle, not just fancy saddles.
Building that financial fortress brick by brick. And the book even gives us a way to calculate this with its wealth equation, right?
Oh, absolutely. That equation's a game changer. It's so simple, but it really makes you think. Basically, it says your expected net worth should be about 1/10 of your age, multiplied by your income.
So time is truly on your side.
It really is. It highlights the power of starting early and letting your investments compound over time. You could have someone earning a great income, but if they're not saving and investing wisely, they're missing out on major wealth accumulation in the long run.
They use some compelling case studies to illustrate this too. Like, remember Charles Bobbins, the fireman?
Oh, yeah.
He became a millionaire not through some huge salary, but by being disciplined with his saving and investing over many years. And then you've got someone like Dr. Ashton, a high-earning physician who's actually more financially vulnerable than you might expect because of his spending habits.
It's a classic case of high income, but not necessarily high net worth.
Right, and that takes us right back to the book's core message. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep and how you grow it.
Exactly. It's about being smart with your money.
Now, ready for a real head scratcher? The book digs into this interesting link between ancestry and wealth.
Oh, yeah, that was fascinating.
Like you'd think, wouldn't you, that English ancestry, being some of the earliest settlers in America, would be at the top of those millionaire charts. First to arrive, first to build their fortunes.
It seems logical, right?
But the book reveals English ancestry actually ranks fourth in terms of millionaire households.
Surprising, isn't it?
Totally. Okay, so who are these unexpected wealth builders then?
Well, the Scottish ancestry group emerges as a fascinating outlier. They're not necessarily the highest earners, but they have a remarkably high concentration of millionaires.
So we can ditch that you need a huge income to be wealthy myth right there. It seems like there's more to it than that, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The book suggests their success boils down to cultural values, things like thrift and long-term thinking, which have been passed down through generations. Saving diligently, investing wisely, and really focusing on building wealth, not just for themselves, but for future generations. That long game strategy really makes a difference.
So it seems like there's a lot we can learn from their approach, regardless of our own background. Now, this concept of thrift is obviously a big theme in the book, but they're not saying you have to live a life of deprivation, are they?
No, not at all. It's more nuanced than that. They talk about frugality being intentional with your spending, avoiding waste in all its forms, not just, living cheaply for the sake of it.
So it's really about aligning your spending with what matters most to you, not denying yourself everything. Do they give us some real-life examples of how these millionaires put this mindset into action?
They do. And this is where it gets really eye-opening. Like, you'd be surprised how many millionaires are incredibly detail-oriented about their spending. There's this one example in the book, this millionaire who refused to spend more than $399 on a suit, even though he could easily afford designer labels.
Wow, talk about making a statement. So we're talking about conscious choices, not deprivation. What about the role of planning in all of this?
Oh, planning is huge for these prodigious accumulators of wealth, or PAWs, as the book calls them. They're not just reacting to their financial situation. They're thinking years, even decades ahead with their budgeting, investing, even big purchases like cars.
It's interesting you mentioned the pause because they contrast them with the underaccumulators of wealth, or UAWs. And it's fascinating how even when they have comparable incomes, their financial outcomes are worlds apart. It really underscores the impact of mindset and habits, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They highlight this with two physicians, Dr. North, a PAW, and Dr. South, a UAW, both high earners. But Dr. North is super strategic with his finances, while Dr. South is more reactive, driven by those short-term wants. Result: Dr. North ends up with a way higher net worth, even though they both have the potential to achieve similar levels of wealth.
Proving yet again it's not always about how much you earn, but how you handle what you have.
Right. Being smart with it.
Now, on that note, the book talks about a strategy a lot of millionaires use for investing, and it's surprisingly straightforward.
It really is. No need for some complicated Wall Street scheme to build wealth. The book calls it the 15% solution, consistently investing at least 15% of your pre-tax income.
Which feels doable, even for someone just starting out.
Exactly. And over time, that consistency, it really adds up.
That snowball effect. Now, where do financial advisors fit into this picture? The book seems to urge readers to be cautious about conventional financial advice.
Oh, definitely. They don't sugarcoat it. They emphasize you don't always need a financial guru to manage your money, and they call out some red flags to watch out for when choosing an advisor.
Do they offer any guidance on finding one who's actually looking out for your best interests?
They do. There's a great story about a millionaire, Mr. Martin, who uses what he calls a tax return test to vet potential advisors. Basically, he asks them to analyze his tax return and see if they can find ways to improve his situation.
That's brilliant.
It's a clever way to assess their competence ALD if they're truly invested in helping him save money.
So it's all about being proactive, doing your homework. Now, the book goes beyond traditional investments, right, like stocks and bonds. What other avenues for building wealth do they explore?
Right. It's not just about the stock market. They talk about millionaires diversifying, looking into things like real estate, private businesses, even niche markets that align with their interests and expertise.
They brought up Dr. North again, didn't they?
Yeah,
Using his agricultural knowledge to make some smart investments.
exactly. He invested in what he knew, proving you don't need to be a Wall Street whiz to make smart financial moves. It's about leveraging your knowledge and spotting those opportunities. Now, the book focuses a lot on individual wealth building, but it also delves into something I know you're passionate about: raising financially responsible children. And it gets real about the potential downsides of giving too much financial help to adult children.
It does. The book calls this economic outpatient care, cautioning against creating a dynamic where children become overly reliant on their parents for financial support. It's a slippery slope that can actually hinder their long-term financial well-being. And they illustrate this with the contrasting examples of Josh and Henry.
Right, Josh and Henry. It's interesting how those two stories play out. Josh, a successful attorney, gets regular financial help from his parents, seems to have it made but struggles to build real wealth. And then there's Henry, the teacher, more modest income, but manages to build a substantial net worth all on his own.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes, even with the best intentions, those handouts can actually hold someone back from reaching their full potential.
It's true. It's like that old saying, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. And that's what this book really drives home, that teaching your children financial independence is more valuable than any inheritance.
Absolutely. So how can parents actually instill those values in their kids? The book does offer some practical advice there, right?
It does. And it boils down to this. It's not about giving your kids a ton of money. It's about teaching them the value of hard work, being responsible with money, making smart choices, those fundamental things.
I remember that story about Dr. North and the King's Rules poster. That one really stuck with me. Remind us about that.
Oh, yeah. So Dr. North's daughter actually made him this poster outlining her King's Rules for financial success. Living below your means, saving diligently, avoiding debt, those core principles.
Smart kid.
Right. And what's amazing is these weren't rules Dr. North forced on her. They were observations she made herself, just from watching him manage money responsibly.
Love that. Talk about leading by example. It's so true. Kids are always watching, picking up on our habits, especially when it comes to money, even when we don't realize it.
Absolutely. And it makes you think about this interesting point the book raises, this idea that often it's the most economically productive child, the one who's financially successful and independent, who might actually receive a smaller share of the parent's wealth. They call it weakening the weak. Because sometimes, by trying to protect the child who might be struggling more financially, parents can inadvertently create a cycle of dependence.
It's a difficult thing for a lot of families to navigate, for sure.
It is. And the
Yeah.
book isn't saying don't support your kids if they're struggling. It's more about finding that balance between offering support and encouraging self-reliance, empowering your children to create their own financial success stories, even if those stories look different for each child.
Such a crucial point. So as we wrap up this deep dive into The Millionaire Next Door, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners are walking away with?
For me, it all comes back to this. Building wealth, it's not about luck. It's not about privilege. It's about making conscious choices, having disciplined habits, and playing that long game. The millionaire next door isn't born. They're made through years of consistent effort, being smart with their money.
And the most important takeaway, it's never too late to start. You can begin implementing these principles today, no matter where you are on your own financial journey. Small changes now, big impact over time.
Exactly. Remember that question the book asks, are you a prodigious accumulator of wealth? Let that be your guide, your motivator. It's never too late to start building that life you envision for yourself, for your family.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This was a great deep dive. Now go back, reread the book. Let's turn this knowledge into action.